So next up, I'm going to go ahead and cool. I thought we had an escapee. Our next speaker is Jonathan Kingsley, and Jonathan is, and you can quote me on this, the world's least irritating wonderkid. For those of us who are, someone give me a polite word for elderly. Grown. For those of us who are grown, the youngest. To be replaced by the glorious new generation. I will let John continue to talk about why everything is terrible.
Okay, so hello everybody. As Jess previously said, I'm Jonathan. This talk is entitled Cracks in the Facade, Why All Security Will Fail and Why You Should Probably Do It Anyway. I've just realized that I actually need to change my display settings because I can't see any of my notes. Better? Awesome. Right. So, who am I? So I'm Jonathan, John for short. You can find me at JF Kingsley up in the corner pretty much anywhere. I mostly use Twitter. Like Jess said, I'm 16, so if you try and buy me a drink later, please make sure I don't go to jail for it.
If any of you try to buy him a drink later, I swear to God.
Yep, so I've been kind of writing, tinkering, software, hardware, pretty much anything on the that kind of side of things, iOS server side. I've seen great code, I've seen code that's probably opened unstoppable portals to the underworld. I have an actual document which states that I'm legally allowed to blow things up, which is a topic that I spoke on last year at Hackference and apparently quite a few people liked. However, I am surprised they allowed me back. So, yeah, it's great to be back here. And as a result of that, I gained a habit of looking under the hood of things a fair bit. So, I realize I'm pretty much walking in the footsteps of giants here, so if you're looking for any of the citations for things I'm going to be referencing, here they are. I'll be posting the links to the slides on Twitter if you want to look through them. Quick disclaimer, I'm not representing my employer. Some of the photos and stuff may not be my own. Please don't sue me if you accidentally set yourself on fire during the course of this presentation. Also, like most of the large-scale vulnerabilities I'll be talking about here are patched, so if you're looking for a cheat sheet, no. So, since I have so much stuff to show you guys, I'm going to go through the actual initial bit, quickfire style. So, I'm going to discuss why computer security has failed in the past. I'm going to discuss why computer security is failing in the present. I'm going to discuss why computer security will fail in the future. Point being, security is horrible, and I'm going to tell you why, because I love you. And if my parents' divorce taught me anything, it's that when you love someone, you tell them horrible things and then leave them for someone younger. So, we are going to be primarily learning through fail, which means that I'm going to explain what a thing is, then I'm going to explain why that thing caused another thing to die a horrible fiery death, because as much as we like to talk about giving lovely fluffy talks explaining how we do things right, we very rarely talk about when we do things wrong. So I have this compendium of fail for you today. So the goal here is basically to help you guys out by process of elimination. So instead of explaining what the cool new IETF approved way of doing it is, if I show you what not to do, in theory that would narrow down what we should be doing. So we're going to be talking about how light bulbs can spy on your home. We're going to be talking about why all your work doors basically have no locks because of bad user sanitation. I'll wait for that one to sink in. There will be no therapy provided, people will be crying in the streets, the system is broken, we are all destined for eternal darkness at the hands of an unfeeling red team, so let's talk about computer security. So, let's start with a fundamental truth here. Humans have been failing since the dawn of time. We have taken it took us several millennia to stop failing at trade. It took us a few more hundred years to learn how to start using fire properly, and then several hundred more to invent a group of people to specifically stop the types of people who failed so hard at making fire that they literally burnt the house down. So, and while the best way to get management excited about a disaster plan is to burn down the building across the street, I doubt corporate will be very happy when they come back from their office after driving their BMW in from their second holiday home in the Hamptons and find a receipt for £200 worth of gas, fire lighters and a slightly singed access control card. Because we live in a world where I say the word car keys, you think of this. when I actually mean a folder called car keys in the file system of your Tesla Model S, which actually contains an RSA key pair and a shell script that runs as root on the entertainment system. Yup. So, problem number one, too many damn sockets. This is a massive problem. Literally everything has a socket nowadays, and thanks to the rise of the Internet of Things, we have a lot of things connected to the Internet that really shouldn't be. And the reason that's bad is because from a security perspective, every device you have connected is like an open door. It's fine to have some, because you've got to get into your house, but the less the better, because then you reduce your attack service, and nobody wants to try and lock a house with 470,000 doors. And yeah, basically, on top of being bad from that perspective, it's also awful when you realize that most of these systems are being checked by the same people who built them, which is like trying to hire Winnie the Pooh to consult on honey security issues. It's going to end badly for you. So, let me start off with a real-life example of why the Internet of Things is potentially going to kill us all. So, there's a particular brand of smart light bulb, which is configurable via a smartphone. And when you send it a command, that then goes to the bulb, and then it forwards it to the rest of the bulbs via a local wireless mesh network. Now, the thing is, though, you can use Wirecast to analyze the packets going across that mesh network, which is a problem. This is not normal, because I'm pretty sure that Thomas Edison didn't envision his brand new invention for bringing fire-free light to millions of people to result in someone's entire house turning into war games and making them play several rounds of global thermonuclear war just to try and cycle the garage door. And we all know, when it comes to broken garage doors remote controlled by light bulbs, the only winning move is not to play. So, if you sniff traffic from said light bulbs, you quickly figure out that they're exchanging the Wi-Fi password over said mesh network. However, they exchange it in an encrypted form, which would be fine, except in the light bulb's firmware, they hard-coded the key. So if you reverse engineer the light bulb's firmware, which is a very odd sentence to physically say, then you can effectively break into the wireless networks of literally any house that's using this particular brand of smart light bulb. And what this means is that if you can leverage that, you have access to the wireless via LNS, or light bulb network insertion, as I like to call it. And from there, things start to get very fun. Now, the camera, on the other hand, is an absolute beauty. So, audience participation time. You see that green light at the top? What do you think that tells you? For those of you who said on, you are completely wrong, because it is not tied to power, it is not indicative of the actual state of the camera, and only turns off when you put the camera into standby mode, which still records photo and video. But the manufacturers say that it doesn't send it to their servers, so apparently everything's fine. There's no problem there. There really isn't, please. And the fact of the matter is that this is not something that's new. In fact, several weeks ago, this is a guy called Brian Krebs. He's an InfoSec reporter guy. He recently published several stories exposing a $600,000 DDoS for hire service. However, undeterred by that, several of the associates of the person who was then arrested used a network of IoT devices to hit his site with a 600 gigabit per second DDoS attack. And that's terrifying, because not only until recently was that impossible to do without government-level resources, that in 2013, the spam house attacks only generated half as much traffic, and that was considered dangerously close to internet threatening. This is twice as large, doesn't rely on misconfigured DNS servers. This was entirely done using IoT malware. In fact, on the 3rd of October, just earlier this month, the source for one of those botnets was released, and not only could it reinfect devices who use the default password within seconds of them coming back online, it could also do all of this remotely, and at one point had as many as 380,000 clients, which is nothing, because the other one had 1 million clients, and unless you're Donald Trump, having 1,380,000 people angrily shouting at you is not a common occurrence. Sorry, I just need to get a drink. So, that's not all, because continuing with access control problems, we are going to open a few doors for you guys. Namely, every single door in this airport, most hospitals, and every single branch of US Bancor. Sound like fun? Let's go. Because the thing all these buildings have in common, besides the fact that they're all part of a game of giant corporate monopoly, is that they all use a company called HID for access control. And if you have most likely seen one of these guys' card readers standing guard over some restricted area in a building. And each one of these card readers runs all the way back to one of these, which is called a door controller. And this controls all the functions of the door, including locks, unlocks, schedules, etc. And in order for these to be integrated into the network, they have a nice service on them called Discovery D, which responds to broadcast UDP packets. And you send it a broadcast, and the controllers come back with some lovely information, like where they are, and some basic stuff like north exterior door or whatever. Common names. Thing is, while it's supposed to do that, it has an undocumented feature for changing the blink cycle of the LED. And when you send it that particular command, it builds up a path to mount apps bin blink, and then runs the blink program. Now, okay, can anyone tell me the glaring problem with this? If anyone spotted the call system in the bottom corner, you are entirely correct, because there is no sanitization on the input that's fed into the system call. So if we send it a Linux command wrapped in backticks, it gets executed by the device as root, which means that with some broadcast UDP packets and no authentication, you can remotely unlock every single door connected to the controller and do it in a way that it is completely impossible to relock them again. And because it responds to broadcast UDP, you can do that to every single door controller on the network at the same time. It's, yeah. And in fact, there are in fact quite a few odd devices connected to the internet, and there's a guy called Dan Tentler who is basically the king of Showdown at this point. He goes around finding these things. For example, did you know touring speakers have web servers built into them? This one does. Additionally, you can send it an MP3 and it will play it. You can't, well, this couldn't possibly go wrong, right? One of my personal favorites he found was a cow milking machine connected directly to the public internet, which gets even more disturbing when you realize it has a horse setting. What is this? Why is it on the internet? What if I told you it gets even better? What if I told you we can make a train disappear with buffer overflows? Okay, integer overflows, but I thought the joke was worth it. So, let's clarify that a little. We're going to make a train disappear completely from the signaling network, which is arguably far more dangerous. So, in order to do that, we are going to give you guys the world's fastest crash course on how integer overflows work. So, in simple terms, you can think of it like a car odometer. So, computers operate using registries, which have a limited amount of space. And if you give them more than their maximum, then they can do one of two things, in this case with integers. One, saturation, where it simply sets the registry to the maximum value as a failsafe, or wrap, where the next increment over the maximum sets off a chain of carryover additions. Except danger, Will Robinson, danger! Because the red bit is outside the memory space that the computer is reading. So when it's carried over outside of what it can hold, and it combines the two, what it actually sees is this. And that's critical, okay? We took 3 eggs, threw them together, and ended up with 6 invisible eggs. You got that? Awesome. Because it is exactly the same thing with train signaling systems in some countries, not here, specifically Switzerland, where one of the main ways these operate is that they have a device like this, which is called an axle counter. And the way these work is that you have them on the track, and every time a wheel passes through it, it counts it. And effectively, it makes sure that the same number of wheels that went in go back out again. So the system knows if a carriage or whatever has accidentally become disconnected in that section of track and can ensure its safety. However, the older equipment was built using 8-bit microcontrollers, meaning if you build a train with more than 255 axles, as soon as that final axle crosses the counter, it will completely disappear. There is now officially no train in that section of track, and there won't be for any of, it's just gone at that point. And as you can imagine, the ramifications of that can be problematic. If you can figure out where this clip is from, I'll give you points, because it's actually really obscure. But it's like a game from 2006 or something, and I just wanted to put it in because this scene is insane. Yes, Zoo Race. Points? I did not believe anyone would actually get that. Wow. Okay, so on to a lighter topic. Let's talk about time travel, as you do. So, more specifically, we're going to kill a phone by making it travel through time. And this is a result of two bugs, one in iOS, which effectively involved phones being completely killed by setting the system date to January 1st, 1970. No one entirely knows why. There's several theories ranging from integer underflow, which is the opposite problem to the one we were discussing before, or alternatively code signing, where the operating system would literally refuse to load itself because the certificate was generated past the original date. But regardless of that, the result was that the only way to fix it was to force a firmware upgrade through DFU. And this was compounded by the fact that until a second patch came in, you could spoof time.apple.com using your own DNS servers. So, some people are beginning to see where I'm going with this. So, usually what your phone does is it sends the message through, message goes to the server sends a lovely date back, and then we're all happy. However, what happens if you swap that out for your own server? Well, what you can do is this. The phone will ask for the date, your router directs you to yours, and then it sends back a lovely new date, which then proceeds to make everything burn. And I actually tested this, and on some test iPhones I had lying around, because reasons, and the specifics aren't important. But the reality of it is that until that patch came in, it did work, and frankly I'm terrified that that would have ever worked, because if you put something like that on public Wi-Fi, then the amount of, there's a lot of collateral damage from that. I am, for some reason, running incredibly under time, so, whatever, conclusion. Let's roll with it. So, throughout all of this, the points that I really want to make known is this: the obvious solutions. Alternatively, when said solutions fail, in true corporate form, I present you with the rule of three bulletproof list of bulletproof answers. And I suppose the first one would be analyze, look at what you're designing, look at the items around you, see what you can spot as holes in your armor. Minimize it when you're designing these types of devices. Designing or buying, arguably. Try and avoid introducing systems with particularly overreaching access. Which is not to say that you shouldn't buy stuff like this, but do something like risk manage it. For example, I keep most of my IoT devices on a separated VLAN. Those types of things will most likely save your ass at some point. And finally, minimize it, because nobody wants your camera having 700,000 permissions, or your flashlight in this case. So when you're actually doing this, then you want to just, build these systems all you want, but think about the ramifications of the services that you are making open from that point. And finally, neutralizing it. Be inquisitive. There is nothing I would love more than if I come out of this talk and I've convinced somebody to go poking under the hood of whatever they use every single day. Because that's how we make this stuff better. If we kind of switch from a reactive viewpoint to a far more proactive one, then where at least everyone has the basics to understand where the bad things are and how to spot them, not necessarily how to fix them, but at least that kind of initial knowledge, then being able to report something bad would make all of this far, far better. However, in the meantime, I'll keep setting swimming pools on fire. If you want to hear me wax lyrical about pretty much anything, do feel free to come up afterwards and say hi. Thank you and good night. And I am in fact 16 minutes under time. So, one, I think I've probably fixed all of the timing problems, and two, does anyone have questions?